Well, what is up, everyone? Welcome back to our lawn and welcome to this little sitting area that my wife created in the front yard. And today I want to talk about the two most important applications that you're going to have if you are somebody who's maintaining a backyard putting green, and those are your fungicide application and plant growth regulator. And so without any real ado, let's get into the first of those applications, which is the fungicide. Now, there's a lot of information out there on rotating fungicides, and there's also a lot of concerns out there about how bent grass is more susceptible to disease and issues than any other grass type, and I can tell you both of those, based on my experience, are somewhat wrong. It is not so much important that we rotate fungicides, but that we apply as many modes of action or groups of fungicides as we can at any given time. And given those are very expensive, I generally recommend doing 2 modes of action at a given time, so that quite often, and what is going to be most affordable and readily available to the homeowner, is going to be either azoxystrobin and propiconazole, or the 2 most common fungicides used by people on YouTube, or what I prefer, which is a product called Armada. So there's a water dispersible granular that you're going to utilize that is the same groups, 3 and 11, as azoxy and prop, but simply different active ingredients. And there is a lot of information out there on fungicides and what is best for you. I picked up a lot of it from my episode over on the Grass Factor on his Thirsty Thursday live stream. I'll put a link to that in the description. I'll try to timestamp it, give you the best place to go. There's like 30 minutes of them telling me way more than I could ever possibly hope to understand on fungicides. I think that is a huge learning opportunity for everybody if you go check that out. Not because of me, but because of what they were all talking about. And so with Armada, there are a range of application rates, which I'll put on the screen, and those correspond with how long you can get away with application intervals. Myself, I use Armada at 1 ounce, the weight ounce, not the liquid ounce, per 1,000 square feet, and I try to keep as close to every 4 weeks as I can on that application. And I do notice if I miss it, I see disease start to creep in. So it is definitely doing its job. It's so important, and I really believe for the backyard putting green folk, and really anybody, if you want to manage a cool season fungicide program, I think Armada is one of the most bulletproof products that you can utilize. It's relatively affordable. It's about the same price from an application perspective as Disease X and the BioAdvance product. If you buy those, generally it's about the same price. It's a smaller container, smaller volume, so it's a little bit easier to manage, and so that's what I tend to prefer. And then the other, and one of the most beneficial things you can do for turf that you're going to be cutting very short, is plant growth regulator. And what these are products that utilize different, again, modes of action, different chemistries, different biologies. I'm not going to pretend to understand it, that reduce the amount that a plant will put out top growth. It will either shorten that growth by basically making I'm not going to pretend to understand it. I'm trying. It's not worth all of our time. The most common and most affordable is going to be T-Nex trinexapac ethyl, I believe. And then the other one is probably a new. There's also Cutlass, a few others. I tended to gravitate simply towards T-Nex. It's been something that's been studied on bent grass putting greens. It's understood in terms of the reapplication window and how to utilize it. And that's what I want to spend the most time about in this video on the plant growth regulator side. So there are some things you need to consider when we first select the application rate. So on the label for bent grass, for cool season turf, there is an application rate based on the height of cut. And again, we're using less product the shorter we're mowing, because again, if you think about how much leaf tissue is there and how much we need to apply to it to cover it, is less if we're mowing at 1/8 of an inch versus 3 inches. So for cool season grasses, you can generally go from 1/8 of an ounce up to 1/2 of an ounce per 1,000. Again, that's putting green length up through like 2.5, 3 inch normal cool season grass. I tend to land at just over 1/8 of an ounce per 1,000 square feet on the practice facility, because that is a little bit heavy for the green. So again, I'm going to be putting forth a little bit more regulation. I'm a little bit light on the fairway. Just again, when we're talking about 1/3 rule, for example, if I can limit growth more on the shorter turf, that's where I figure I've found about a happy place. So I actually use 40 milliliters across 6,000 square feet is the exact amount that I'm applying for myself. And so that is your application. Quite often I do both of these together, as during the warm months, the reapplication window does tend to be around every 2 weeks for plant growth regulator. And then that obviously aligns with the every 4 weeks for the Armada application, but it's not every 2 weeks. That's not how the reapplication window works for plant growth regulators. Plant growth regulator reapplication is based on a concept of growing degree days. In simplest terms, it is basically a measure of the temperature, because the plant will synthesize or the product will break down. Again, I'm not going to pretend to know exactly how it works, based on how hot it is. So the hotter it is, the more quickly the product breaks down in the plant, or is utilized by the plant, depending on which one it is. And so you can do this math yourself, either keeping track of the high and low temperature, or you can use the product the tool that Syngenta has already put out there for you. That link will be in the description. It'll probably be a pinned comment, so you can check that out. You put your zip code in, and then for a cool season, folks, we're gonna be working off a 200 growing degree day interval at 0 degrees Celsius. So those drop downs are available in there. I'll have them on screen and show you. And so we are looking for 200 growing degree days on our shortest cut turf, our turf cut at 1/8 of an inch up to 3/8 of an inch at fairway height. And that interval changes based on how tall the grass is, not on how much we're applying. How much you're applying, it comes down to how much regulation you get. Do not want to go high, it will just brown out your lawn. Again, how long it lasts is entirely dependent on temperature. So you will make an application. For example, my last T-Nex application was on June 12th. So again, with this all set up with my zip code, with 0 degrees Celsius selected, I will go to the day that I applied. On that day, there will be a cumulative growing degree day total for the season. I will take that and I will add to it 200 days. Then we're going to continue to monitor this total on an ongoing basis until that new total, that new cumulative total for the year, is 200 days higher than it was on the day we applied. So that is what you're looking for. For example, I think that application was somewhere around 1,300 days. So I am waiting until that calculation gets to 1,500 days, and then it's time for me to reapply again. Mowing height matters in this. Again, the taller you're cutting, the longer that interval is going to be. So I've had what felt like pretty good growth reduction on when I've been using it on my front yard, for example, cut it 2.5 inches up to 350, 400 growing degree days before I was starting to see it rebound, starting to grow very aggressively, and I wanted to reapply again. So you can play around with it a little bit. Obviously, if you are starting to see discoloration, that's either because you have reapplied it too quickly, as it will compound itself in the plant if it's not fully broken down, fully metabolized, or your rate was too high. So again, those, I believe, even more important than fertilization, more important than anything else, the fungicide and plant growth regulators will make a huge difference in the health and ability of you to have success in your putting greens, to prevent yourself from losing the lawn to disease, and then the myriad of benefits that plant growth regulators are shown to have in turf grass, from increased drought stress tolerance, increased shade tolerance, increased heat tolerance, reduced carbohydrate utilization in the plant. There are a ton of benefits from that plant growth regulator, and hopefully this little walkthrough is helpful in terms of how you're going to use that product, when you're going to apply, when. And beyond that, it's just a liquid application. You're going to mix it up, put it in your backpack sprayer, 1 gallon of solution for every 1,000 square feet, and those rates are amount of product per 1,000 square feet as well. So measure your yard. If you haven't done all those things, all that information, all that is already on YouTube. How to do spray applications, all of that. I'm not going to walk through that. I just wanted to talk through what I believe is the easiest way to maintain, manage your putting green when it comes to these two very important applications on your greens. So hopefully that was helpful. Leave a comment with any questions you might have. Subscribe to the channel if you want to continue to follow along to what we're doing. Again, we put some sand out there, and I've also seeded the green. That's finally started to come in the area that wasn't taking yet. So as always, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.